Hi, this is Melissa, and today I'm going to talk you through completing a function report adult. That's SSA-3373. If you're applying for Social Security, you're likely to get this form at least once in the process. It's standard procedure. So this form asks you all kinds of questions about where you live, what you do during the day, what your activities and likes and dislikes are, and how your disability affects your ability to do these things. So first, on the first page, we're going to look at the question that's trickiest for a lot of my clients. How do your illnesses, injuries, or conditions limit your ability to work? I suggest people complete this one after they have finished the rest of the form because it is pretty tricky. But when you're completing this, my suggestion is that you have to try to think about your ability to work in the way that Social Security thinks of it. So they want a list of physical limitations and mental disability. So how does your injury affect your ability to work? So if, for example, you have a shoulder, you have a torn rotator cuff and you work as a carpenter. So I'm going to use this example. Basically, you would write, I can't carry more than 5 pounds with my injured arm. I can't lift my injured arm any higher than shoulder height, so I'm not able to work above my head. Because of the pain of my injury, I'm off task for approximately 15 minutes per hour, thinking about my pain, putting ice on my arm, or resting my arm. So it's, rather than say, my injury has affected my ability to make money and support my family, and I love my work and I want to get back to work. That's not what they're looking for there. They're looking for a set of very distinct limitations as specifically as possible. How much can you lift? How much can you reach? What can you not do in terms of physical activity? For mental conditions, this is a little trickier, but they're looking for, are you able to focus on tasks? Are you able to understand information or instructions? Are you able to work with the general public? If you're dealing with a mental disability, it may be more difficult to answer these questions because I think it's just more difficult to think about them and to kind of accept those limitations. But that's what Social Security is looking for. Take your best stab at it. And then question 6, describe what you do from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, right? And they give you 3 little lines to write on. I suggest you answer this one once you've completed the rest of the form so you get a better taste of the kind of answers that they're looking for. But on average, what I see is people will say, I wake up, I take 15 minutes to stretch because I'm really sore when I wake up. I take a shower, take my medication. For breakfast, I'm not able to cook a hot meal, but I can make toast. I'll sit down while the toaster is cooking. And basically kind of go through day to day what you're doing. Guarantee if your claim gets to a trial, the judge is going to ask you the same question. So it's worth thinking about. And if you don't have space to describe everything you do in your entire day in this little spot, attach an extra sheet of paper, type it up. In terms of do you take care of someone, if the answer is yes, whether you take care of a person or a pet or animal, be explicit as to what you do for them. If you care for your 17-year-old son, that's a very different job than caring for a 1-year-old. If you care for a little terrier that you let out in your yard and it does its business and it comes in and you feed it and that's all you do, that's very different than taking 3 giant Great Danes for a walk, right? So be specific as you can because these are kind of questions that are trying to trick you into stating that you have more abilities than you may have. For personal care, a lot of people who are disabled don't have problems performing these duties. If you do, feel free to write them down. I see a lot of personal care. Do you have trouble dressing yourself? Yes, I have trouble putting on my shoes because it hurts my back. For bathing, I have to sit down in the shower because sometimes I can get lightheaded or dizzy. So those are the kinds of things that they like to see. For feeding yourself, they're asking more about can you physically put food in your mouth versus can you cook. Cooking comes later in the form. Do you need special reminders to take care of yourselves, or do you need reminders to take medications? These questions, and there are a few more as we go through, are aimed more at people who have mental health disabilities versus folks with physical disabilities. If you have a torn rotator cuff, you probably don't need reminders to take a shower. If you're dealing with severe depressive disorder, you may need those. In terms of meals, again, whether or not you prepare your own meals, how you should answer this question is going to be based off of what your limitations are. If you are 60 years old and you have a torn rotator cuff and you used to work as a carpenter, it's not going to be harmful for your claim if you state that you can cook full meals. You just can't lift the giant pot of lobsters onto the stove without help. But if you're a younger person or your condition is more severely limiting and you have to state that you can't stand for more than 5 minutes, then you're going to need to be more explicit into what your limitations are, where you can only cook simple meals or frozen dinners because you're not able to stand long enough to cook a full regular meal. And then in terms of housework and yard work, again, if you're not able to do those things, then the judge is going to ask why. So if you have very severe limitations, you should write in here, listen, I can't do this stuff. My wife does it. I can't do this. I hire a maid because I literally can't load the dishwasher due to the severity of my condition. So that's something to bear in mind. Generally, the older you are and the more physically hard your work used to be, the less limitations you need to show. If you're a 30-year-old person disabled due to depression, they're going to want to see a lot of limitations. If you're 60 years old and you have a work history as a sprinkler fitter where you're up on a ladder carrying 200 pounds every day, all day, you just have to show that you have a very minor limitation and that prevents you from working. So that's something to bear in mind. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me because I probably know the answer of how disabled you need to be to get these benefits. For question 17, are you able to handle money? This is a question, again, is aimed more towards folks who have mental disabilities. If you say that you're not able to handle your own money, and I have plenty of claimants who are not, that means that Social Security may not pay you directly and they may assign a representative payee to pay your money to instead. That's something to bear in mind if your condition is kind of in between. Do you want to get paid directly, or do you want the money to go to a trusted friend, family member who can manage that money on your behalf and make sure that your bills are actually getting paid? Hobbies or interests, those you would put everything that you liked to do both before you became injured and afterwards, because then it goes on to question C, describe any changes in these activities since the illness or injuries began. So if you were a world champion cyclist, write that in as a hobby or interest. That's amazing. But then if you've had a knee replacement, maybe that one's off the table. So make sure you write the change. I used to love to cycle. I used to cycle 100 miles a weekend, and now I can only ride to the neighborhood store and back, and even that's painful. And then we get more into kind of questions that may be more related to mental disabilities, like social limitations. Certainly physical conditions have an impact on how social someone's able to be, how long you can sit in a car, how long you're able to be outside walking around. But again, some of these are more for mental health conditions. And then we get to section 20A, information about abilities. This is where a lawyer is handy because I can tell you my secret here. There's not enough space here for you to write everything you need to write. So you're going to need another sheet. And what you're going to do is you're going to go item by item and explain in depth what your limitations are. So you have just, I'm looking at the document now and you can't see it, but it's just a series of check marks, 20 check marks. Do you have a disability that prevents you from lifting? Check. Does it hinder you from squatting? Check. And so that's not sufficient. The more in-depth you can be in this section, the better. So I suggest you attach a new sheet and you would write lifting. What's your limitations with lifting? Well, I have a torn rotator cuff. With my bum arm, I'm only able to lift about 5 pounds from the floor to shoulder height, and I can't lift anything from shoulder height and higher. With my good arm, I can lift 20 pounds all the way up. To be as in-depth as possible and go through each one. So if you have a torn rotator cuff, reaching, what limitations do you have for reaching? Well, I can't reach overhead at all with my right arm. I can only reach at shoulder height for maybe 2 minutes before I get a really severe burning pain. I can only reach to the side for about that length of time. The more specific you can be, the better, because this is setting you up to get benefits. If you have a back condition, go into that. Does that affect lifting? Yes. Does it affect squatting? Yes. Bending, standing, reaching. For a back condition, this could affect a ton of this stuff. So the more in depth you can be, the better in terms of lifting, walking, Sitting, they want numbers. How much can you lift? How far can you walk? How long can you sit? How long can you stand? Again, the more specific you can be, the better. If you don't know, go outside and take a walk. How far can you walk before it starts hurting? Some of these are also more for mental health conditions like completing tasks, concentration, understanding. But even if you have a physical condition, put this information in and think about how your pain affects your ability to understand. Are you able to watch a full-length documentary and pay attention? If you're in really severe pain, probably not. It does affect your ability to complete a task or concentrate on what you're doing. If you are in pain and you take pain medication, that can severely affect your ability to perform some of these more mental tasks. So that's something to bear in mind. In terms of the rest of the questions, again, we're branching more into mental health disabilities. How well do you get along with folks? Have you ever been fired from a job? If your claim is a mental health one, it's important to be as honest as possible, even if it is uncomfortable, because if you are getting fired from jobs because you can't get along with people, that helps your claim for Social Security. It certainly doesn't help you get another job, but for the purposes of Social Security, that's very helpful. Have you noticed any unusual behavior or fears? Again, this is a specific question for people with severe mental illness and phobias. So, you know, a lot of people will go very in depth, but basically if your claim isn't for mental conditions, it's probably not as relevant if you have unusual phobias or fears. But it can be relevant, again, if you are having mental disabilities, if you're having paranoia, if you have white coat syndrome where you get panic attacks if you go to the doctor, those kind of things. It can be helpful to fill those in. And then we go on to your list of medication side effects you have. Put any side effect that you think you might have. You feel a little drowsy after you take a medication? Write it in. Does your stomach feel upset sometimes? Write it in. The more, the better. That can help build your claim. And then for remarks, that's kind of the end of the form. That's your place to put in any additional information that you think can be helpful for your claim. Don't overdo it. These forms typically don't have a huge weight on your claim, but they can hurt your claim if you put too much about what you do like to do, what you are able to do. So bear that in mind. If you have any questions for all of my clients, I always review these forms. I offer to fill it out with them, and I've sat with many clients and gone question by question. It's part of the service that I provide in helping my clients get their benefits. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Shoot me an email. My name's Melissa at Resilience Law. Give me a call. Let's get started.